Hello and welcome back once again to the bottom 12 movies that I saw in theaters for 2017. So if you watched my top 12 video, then you would have saw that I ended up with only 11 movies for my top list, and I had to go back through all the movies I saw for the year and try to narrow down a number 12 for the list, and ended up torn between two movies and finally decided which one would be number 12 on the list, but I decided to keep the 13th item in as an honorable mention. And as I was going back through the list, I was also looking over my bottom 12 list for the year, which did have 12 movies on it. But as I was looking at the number 12 spot on the list and going back over the list of all the movies I saw throughout the year, I couldn't quite figure out why I had put my number 12 choice above another movie on the list, because that one wasn't a good movie either. And the more I thought about it, I kind of remember not liking the 13th movie more than the 12th movie. So I was trying to think back to what would have made me put number 12 above number 13, and I just couldn't quite figure it out. So I went on to Google and I was looking at a plot summary for the 12th movie, only to realize I was thinking of a completely different movie, which we will get into more of that when I actually get to the number 12 movie. But my number 12 choice was justified once I thought about it. However, since the top 12 list ended up being a top 13 with an honorable mention, I figured if the top 12 can have an honorable mention, then the bottom 12 could as well. So our first movie up on the list is an honorable mention, technically the 13th worst movie I saw of the year, but I don't feel like changing the title on this video. So our honorable mention movie this year is The Bye Bye Man. So overall, the reason this is only an honorable mention and didn't actually make the list this year is because although it was a bad movie, it was more in the execution of the movie versus the actual concept of the movie itself. I feel that in a better writer's hands, this could have actually been a fairly decent film, but the way it was written, the way it was directed, the way it was acted, it just fell really short of being anything. And for those of you who haven't seen the movie, it was basically the concept of the game as a horror movie. And if you don't know what the game is, then you've already lost the game. And that's basically what the Bye Bye Man was. It's this boogeyman type of creature that once you know his name, you're already infected. You can't get rid of him. And you become compelled to spread his name either through voice or writing it down somewhere or anything to where the next person that sees what you wrote down becomes infected just the way you were and continues to spread his name. And that's how he kills people. Again, I feel that in the hands of better writers, this could have been done to where it actually worked a little bit better. But the way it exists now, it's just not a good movie. And that's why The Bye Bye Man is our honorable mention this year on our bottom 12 list of movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 12. The number 12 spot on our list this year goes to Friend Request. Now, like I said, I was trying to figure out why I had Friend Request on the list over Bye Bye Man, and the more I thought about it, it just wasn't making sense to me. But as I looked up the plot summary on Google, I realized I was thinking of two completely different movies, because the movie I was originally thinking of that wasn't quite as bad was Unfriended from 2014, I believe it was, which had a somewhat similar concept but executed a lot better. And I think it's mainly because the titles on these movies should have been switched, because Unfriended fits the title of Friend Request more, and Friend Request fits the title of Unfriended more once you've actually seen the movies. So this is a movie about a oddball girl who everyone at school picks on. One girl decides, maybe she's not that bad, maybe she's just misunderstood, tries to be her friend. The girl turns out to be completely insane, and the girl cuts her off, says, "Hey, I tried, but I just can't be a part of this." The girl self-deletes, and then her ghost comes back to get revenge on the girl who unfriended her by making her lose all her friends and feel how alone that she was when she was still alive. And honestly, with these types of movies, usually you would feel sympathy for the ghost and understand why they're killing people. And in this movie, the ghost is not justified at all. Yeah, some of the people were dicks and probably would have deserved what they got, but she only really focuses on the one person who tried to be her friend before she went crazy and ruined it. So really, the girl separating herself from this crazy person did nothing wrong. She didn't give in to the peer pressure of all her friends. She tried to befriend this girl, said, "Hey, maybe she's not so bad," and she's the one who gets tortured as a result of it. And there was just no redeeming qualities about the ghost girl whatsoever. Compared to Unfriended, which was about a girl who was bullied and self-deleted and came back as a ghost to get revenge on the people who claimed to be her friends, but were the ones who actually set her up. So I'm trying to remember back, and I believe Unfriended actually made my bottom 12 list that year as well. But as far as comparing it to the movies on this list, I liked it better than Bye Bye Man or Friend Request. That's how bad Friend Request was compared to Unfriended, and that's why Friend Request is my number 12 pick for the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 11. My number 11 pick for the bottom 12 movies this year goes to Birth of the Dragon. So, for those of you who didn't see the review, this is a somewhat biographical film about the life of Bruce Lee, the early days of Bruce Lee when he first came to America and was trying to establish himself as a film star and set up his martial arts schools and things like that, which has been done before and has been done a lot better before. And the main reason this is the number 11 spot on my bottom 12 list this year is because, as I said in the review, they just make Bruce Lee appear to be an obnoxious prick the whole time. And that just wasn't who Bruce Lee was. Yes, he could be cocky at times, but he wasn't just an outright prick. And in this movie, they just make him really unlikable. And with that in mind, being a fan of Bruce Lee, seeing him besmirched like that is kind of off-putting. And that's why Birth of the Dragon is my number 11 pick for the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 10. Our number 10 spot this year on our bottom 12 movies of 2017 goes to Annabelle Creation. How many more Annabelle movies do we need? I don't really care for the Conjuring series. I don't care for the Annabelle series. And I'm just over this whole concept of these movies. We didn't need to see where Annabelle came from. It's just kicking a dead horse, milking a dead franchise, just because it keeps producing money because for some reason people like these movies. Personally, I don't. I don't care about Annabelle in general. And I just wish they would stop making these films already. And that is why Annabelle Creation is my number 10 pick for the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 9. Our number 9 pick for this year goes to The Mummy. And I'm actually somewhat sad to say that because I was actually looking forward to this movie. I am a big fan of horror films, especially the classic horror films, Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and so on. So when I heard that Universal was relaunching their monster universe and we're going to make a whole cinematic universe using all their classic horror characters, I was actually looking forward to it. But then I saw this film and I am no longer looking forward to the Dark Universe. Honestly, I think a lot of the problem with this movie stems from them casting Tom Cruise in the lead role. From what I understand, originally the character who plays the actual mummy, the female character, was supposed to be the original lead and had a whole other story written around her. But when Tom Cruise signed on, he kind of demanded rewrites and wanted to be the center of attention through the whole film and be the main star. So the whole thing was kind of rewritten around him. And it just really drugged the whole movie down. And I don't see anything different going forward with the remainder of what they have planned so far for the Dark Universe. Recently, they also released a overall cast photo of who they're going to have in all the other upcoming movies before they do the big crossover event at the end. And you're running into the problem of it's too many big name actors. I believe Johnny Depp was there, Tom Cruise is there, and a bunch of other top level celebrities in that same realm. And you're just going to overinflate your entire movie budget with having these actors on board versus if you had got a slightly lesser known actor, writ the movies the way they were supposed to be, and put them out that way, you probably would have been a lot better off. But I just don't see it going forward with as many big name actors as you have in there. I mean, if you go back and look at things like The Expendables, they've been trying to make something with a lot of those guys all appearing in the same movie for many years, and it just was not possible because of how much each of them gets paid per performance. But they were all willing to come together for The Expendables at a smaller pay scale so that they could all appear in the movie, even if it was only briefly. And even then, it was still kind of an event to pull off. And I don't see any of the actors that are currently listed as being involved in the Dark Universe as being willing to take any type of a pay cut. So I just don't feel it's going to work when you try and use that many big name actors. And obviously, Tom Cruise has already proved that by the way he completely hijacked and had the script entirely rewritten to be about him instead of focusing on the actual mummy from the movie. And that is why The Mummy is my number 9 pick on the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 8. Our number 8 spot this year goes to Suburbicon. So, Suburbicon is a movie about a lot of things happening all in the same neighborhood, all at the same time, and no one knows what the heck is going on. Now, this is a concept that has been done in other movies, and it has been done significantly better than what Suburbicon did. The movie starts out okay, but once it starts to branch out into all the different stories it's trying to tell, things just go off the rails. It's hard to follow certain things. And by the end of the film, you're just sitting there wondering, why did any of that have to happen? And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that's why it's higher on the list than a lot of these other films, is because it had potential to actually be a decent movie. And the fact that it went so off the rails by the end, it was just kind of disappointing, because it did have a decent cast. It had a okay story. Could have been a lot better, but was just utter nonsense by the end. And that's why Suburbicon is our number 8 spot on my list of the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 7. All right, I know I'm going to get some slack for this one because it was the Academy's top pick of the year, but my number 7 spot this year on the worst movies I saw of 2017 goes to The Shape of Water. I don't know what the Academy and everyone else loves so much about this film. It's a boring ass movie about a woman who is part of the cleaning staff at a government facility, finds out they have the creature from the Black Lagoon locked up in a cage, somehow manages to fall in love with it and helps it escape, only to find out at the end that she might be part of his species and never knew it. And once they escape, they go live together underwater. Spoilers. Again, with this movie, I feel like in better hands, the story could have been a lot better, could have been executed a lot better, but it just fell really flat with me. I was kind of bored watching it, didn't really care by the end. And I think the fact that everyone praised it so much and the Academy loved it so much is why The Shape of Water is my number 7 pick for the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 6. Our number 6 spot this year goes to King Arthur: Legend of the Sword. Now, I have always been a fan of King Arthur folklore. It was among one of my favorite stories growing up, and any other media that has been even loosely tied into Arthurian folklore, I've usually been a fan of. And most movies about King Arthur, I've also been a fan of. However, out of all the movies revolving around King Arthur that I've ever seen, this has got to be the worst one. And considering that it's a story that has been done so many times before and so much better, I don't know how you mess it up and how you make something that is so nonsensical and boring out of a subject matter that has been done over and over and over again so much better so many times before. And that is why King Arthur: Legend of the Sword is our number 6 spot on the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 5. Our number 5 spot this year goes to Flatliners. So for those of you who didn't know, Flatliners is a remake of a late 80s, early 90s film of the same name, and was honestly one of the most psychologically creepy movies I'd ever seen in my life. And although I haven't seen it in quite a long time, it is still considered a classic amongst 80s kids, and not something that necessarily needed a remake, but we got a remake anyway. And of course, it was just complete trash. Everything that made the original so good and so psychologically traumatizing and just overall interesting has been completely stripped away from this, and it's just been turned into complete millennium schlock that every theater is producing now, where nothing is original anymore. And let's take all the stuff that people used to love and just completely demolish it because we don't understand what made it popular in the first place, and we'll just regurgitate a bunch of trash films that are remakes in name only and have nothing even closely resembling what made the original popular. It's just another in a long line of movies that Hollywood has been doing this to. If you're going to do a remake of this movie, it deserved a lot better than what it got. And that's why Flatliners is our number 5 pick on the bottom 12 movies that I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 4. Our number 4 spot this year goes to The Dark Tower. For those of you who don't know The Dark Tower, basically all of Stephen King's books exist within a shared universe, and the bridge between that shared universe is The Dark Tower. So it sort of borrows from the multiverse theory that is popular in comic books, where there's an Earth 1, an Earth 2, an Earth 3, whatever, each existing together at the same time, but separate from each other. And the Dark Tower is basically like a central point that all the worlds bridge off of. You could also relate it to the Norse world tree, where all of the the 9 realms are connected through a central point. That's basically kind of what the Dark Tower is. This was more established in a Stephen King book series of the same name that explained how all of his other stories were connected together. And amongst Stephen King fans, it was a very popular book series, so a lot of people were looking forward to this movie when it was announced. However, being that it was part of a book series, it feels like they tried to cram too much of the entire overall series into a standard runtime movie, which means a lot of stuff had to be cut out in favor of other things being added in. And by the end, it was just really hard to follow. I'm usually pretty good at following what's going on in a movie compared to a lot of my friends. Anytime we're watching films together, they'll be like, wait, what's going on? And I'll have to take a moment to explain to them what they missed. And they'll always ask me, when did they explain that? And I would have to go back and tell them when it was explained in the film. And they're like, oh, I must have missed that. So I'm usually good at picking up on the flow of a film and knowing what's going on with it. In The Dark Tower, I felt like one of my friends where I just absolutely had no idea what was going on most of the time. Like I follow little bits of it, but I found myself constantly asking myself, wait, what is even going on right now? Why is this happening? Did they explain what this was? And that's not just a me complaint. The people who have actually read the Dark Tower series and were looking forward to this movie have said a lot of the same things, that it was just kind of all over the place and a lot of stuff was cut out and they tried to put too much into one film, where if much like It Chapter 1, they would have focused the first movie on one specific section of the series and then planned a second film that would continue it, it probably would have done better. I believe I did hear that they are planning a sequel to this, but given the reaction to a lot of the fans, it probably won't make the light of day, which means we're just stuck with this one half-baked film that never really has a full-on conclusion because it was supposed to continue on beyond what it actually showed. And that is why The Dark Tower is our number 4 spot on the bottom 12 movies that I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 3. Our number 3 spot this year goes to A Cure for Wellness. This was a movie about water, and overall, it was just extremely boring. It wasn't hard to follow what was going on. It was just more of a, why is this going on? Why is this a thing? Why does this movie even exist? None of this is relevant to anything anywhere ever, but yet it exists. It almost feels like someone was trying to be artsy and didn't know how to pull off artsy and just kind of produced this dribble that was just a wasted period of my life that I will never get back. And I actually had quite a bit of a struggle on where I was going to place this on the list because I had to debate with myself, is a movie being this boring worse than some of the other movies on the list, or is the fact that it was that boring justification enough for it to be as high up as it is? There are other films on this list this year that were also boring, and they are ranked a lot lower than this one was. And I think the main reason is because even with those films, even though they were boring, there was enough of a plot going on that I wasn't completely checked out of the movie. And in this, honestly, by the time it got to a certain point in the movie where they started to discuss the water and why the water was important, I had completely checked out and just didn't really care anymore. I just kept waiting for the movie to wrap up and end because there was no place for it to really go. And yet that was barely at the halfway mark. So you would think that any other time, the halfway mark means, well, maybe it'll turn itself around. But no, it literally had no place to go. I very strongly considered making this my number 1 pick this year, but after debating it a little bit, I decided that being annoyed with a certain movie was higher on the list than being bored by a movie. And that's why A Cure for Wellness is our number 3 spot on the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 2. The number 2 spot on our list this year goes to Mother. This is everything that A Cure for Wellness wanted to be. An artsy film trying to say something, but going absolutely nowhere. Mother did it slightly better, but still by the end of it, that's all this movie was artsy trash that served no real purpose. It's one person's attempt at making a biblical story without actually making a biblical story, having it tied to religion without actually saying this tied to religion, and trying to do it in an overtly artsy way, and it basically just turning into nonstop nonsense that serves no purpose. Through a lot of the movie, I was like, why is this happening? Why was there this sudden shift? Why did this person suddenly start doing this out of nowhere? And as it got to a certain point in the film, I was like, oh, I get it. They're telling the story of the Bible. But even knowing that, I still just didn't connect to it. Normally, I don't mind religious films, but when they're done like this, I not only found myself myself bored by it, but annoyed by it because it was trying to be smarter than what it had any credit to be. Now, you could just say that artsy films like that aren't my wheelhouse, but again, I've seen other artsy films that were done a lot better than this, pulled off what it was trying to pull off a lot better than this, just had a better overall execution in general, and were able to be artsy without being pretentious. And I think that's really the overall thing, is this just comes off a lot more pretentious and somebody sniffing his own farts and thinking that it makes him better than everyone else. And that's why Mother is our number 2 pick for the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. Number 1. And our number 1 spot for the worst movie I saw in theaters in 2017 goes to The Snowman. So why did The Snowman end up at number 1? Basically because, as I said earlier in the video, I was extremely disappointed by this film. When I first saw a preview for The Snowman, it looked really interesting. I was really looking forward to seeing it. Waited a long time after the preview came out before the movie was finally released, and I finally got to see it. And throughout the entire movie, I was just finding myself more and more annoyed at how bad the film was compared to what the preview made it look like. I know that this was also based on a book series, and from what I hear, the book is actually pretty amazing. So a lot of people like me were looking forward to this movie, but I was not looking forward to it so much based off the book because I've never read the book, but I was looking forward to it based more off the preview that I saw. But other people were looking forward to it based off the book, and even they said that compared to the book, this is complete trash. Something that had so much potential to be so much better and probably could have been a top movie of the year completely fell short, was completely boring, completely nonsensical, and completely annoying. And at the end of the day, as I said, I had to debate whether my annoyance with this movie, because I wanted it to be good and it wasn't, if that was worse than just being completely bored out of my mind by a movie. And at the end of the day, I decided that it was, because where the other movie I was just bored, this movie actually made me angry. And that's why The Snowman is our number 1 pick for the bottom 12 movies I saw in theaters in 2017. So there you have it. That is my bottom 12 list for the year. A new year is upon us, and hopefully the next batch of films that we get to see in 2018 are a lot better than these. So we will wrap this up here. Again, as always, thank you for watching, and we will see you in 2018.